back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are taking a very special look at one of the most popular sports cars of the modern age, the Mazda MX-5. We begin with the 1990 Mazda MX-5 1.6, 116 horsepower, 100 foot-pound torque, 2,210 pounds of weight, where it all began. So of course this is the least powerful, least torquey and lightest car we have here today. This was the car that emerged out of the factory in 1989 and by 1990 had made its way to the American shores. A little bit surprising considering, but there you go. The MX-5 was supposed to be a homage to the classic British sports car, taking lines from the Lotus Elan. The gearbox sound, of course, most famously was produced using MGB tapes. There's a bunch of crazy stuff with the development of this car. It is quite a miracle that it managed to emerge as a front-engined rear-wheel drive sports car, but that's what we got, and it's been tearing up the world for the last 30 years. Although tearing up in this case is subjective, because this thing hasn't got a lot of power. As far as it goes to drive though, it is very, very fun, as you'd probably expect from a Mazda MX-5. Actually surprisingly good at handling. The handling is really snappy. It'll turn into a corner when you need to. It is very much chuckable as well. I was having quite a lot of fun with this car, not necessarily going fast around the track, but it was quite fun to sort of chuck around and have a little bit of fun with it that way. Not one of the most fun cars well, it is actually in the most fun cars I've driven around the Top Gear track. Maybe not quite as good as some others. Volkswagen Rabbit I have a lot of fun with every time I drive that, and there's a few other cars, but yeah, the MX-5 really is a very, very good car indeed, and this was a great first effort by Mazda. But if you want a little bit more power, you can upgrade to the 1994 Mazda MX-5, which had a 1.8 litre engine, 128 horsepower, 110 foot-pound torque, 2,330 pounds of weight. So you get an extra 12 horsepower and an extra 10 foot-pounds of torque to play with. You also get the hardtop in the case of the version in-game, which I think makes the car look a lot better. Not a huge fan of convertibles, I'm much more a fan of hardtop coupes. Of course, both of these cars were from the NA generation, probably my least favourite generation of the Mazda MX-5, I'll be honest, as much as that is quite a controversial opinion when it comes to a lot of people with these. A lot of people swear by the NA, say it's the best one. Me personally, don't get me wrong, I don't hate the NA or anything, I think it's quite a good car, but it's my least favourite. I much prefer the NB, ND, and as of late the NC is really starting to grow on me as well, so sorry NA. As far as this one drives with the 1.8 litre engine though, I've got to be honest, it's not quite as nice as the 1.6. The 1.6, I'm going to put this down to the extra weight incurred by the 1.8. As much as it is more powerful and more torquey and in theory a lot quicker, the extra weight, it does weigh about 100 pounds more, which shouldn't affect the car all that much, but maybe in this case it does. It's just not quite as fun, not quite as chuckable, not quite as snappy. It's still by no means a bad car. If you're going to choose between the 1.6 and the 1.8, honestly, if you upgrade them, you probably won't notice too much of a difference, but for me personally, the 1.6 is the more enjoyable car to drive, the 1.8 is the more usable vehicle to drive. Next up though, we have the 2005 Mazda Speed MX-5, 178 horsepower, 166 foot-pound torque, 2,529 pounds of weight, the most powerful produced from factory Mazda MX-5 ever made, because this one has a turbocharger. Turbocharging was quite a popular upgrade for previous generations of Mazda MX-5. There was even BRE Turbo in the UK that would offer essentially factory warranted Mazda MX-5 NAs with turbochargers, but this was when Mazda Speed decided to get involved, attached a little turbo to the MX-5 and sent it out the door. It's since become one of the most desirable and sought after Mazda MX-5s, despite being of the NB generation, which is perhaps the most forgotten of the MX-5s. People don't seem to really like the NB, I don't really know why, it's my personal favourite, but there you go. As far as it goes to drive, it is really very, very good. It is essentially all of the MX-5 fun and charm in a package that actually moves. It actually has quite a decent amount of straight line speed. Admittedly, there is a bit of an issue with low speed snap oversteer. It can do that. I mean, you know, depending on your preference, that's quite fun or not. It is pretty easy to manage. It doesn't oversteer all that much, it's just in low speed I find the rear end can let go on this vehicle. I don't know if that's just down to the tiny tyres on it or something of the sort, but either way, a very good car to drive and one that I do like quite a lot. Next up are the 2013 Mazda MX-5, 167 horsepower, 140 foot-pound torque, 2,593 pounds of weight. This is the heaviest car we have here today, the heaviest generation of the Mazda MX-5, the NC. This one was fitted with a 2-litre engine, I believe, which is actually kind of good considering this thing is almost matching the power figures of that standard turbo 1.8 Mazda Speed MX-5 we just saw. But of course, with this one weighing slightly more, we're not expecting it to be quite as quick. The NC is one that I originally sort of wrote off a little bit. The first generations of these, before the facelift, did look very weird. They had a sort of spaced out look to them. They did end up improving that in 2013 with this one, the facelifted model. And I actually think the facelifted model is quite a good looking car. They come in some great colours, like this apple green for example, which I think really sets the car off. And yeah, it is a pretty good looking car in certain guises. I think it's the 20th anniversary model are my personal favourite. As far as it goes to drive, it's a great car, as you'd expect a Mazda MX-5 to be. Very neutral handling. The MX-5 has sort of grown up a little bit here. It's not quite as fun or as chuggable as the original NA, but it is just a good at handling, and you know, it's got the speed to match it now as well. Again, that weight may deter some people. You can do weight reduction to get some of that out of there, but overall I think this is a pretty smashing car to drive, and one that I do actually quite like. Speaking of NC MX-5s, the 2013 Mazda MX-5 Cup car, 167 horsepower, 140 foot-pound torque, 2,420 pounds of weight. So, if you ever want a racing series, I mean, the Mazda MX-5 makes a great car to do that with. It's low cost, and it's a pretty good handling car out the box. All you really need to do is attach a roll cage to it and a few other bits, and then you have this car, the Mazda MX-5 Cup car, which I believe you can also buy directly from Mazda. Not this generation, of course, it'd be an ND now, but either way, these things are buyable from Mazda, straight kitted out and ready for the track. As far as this one goes to drive, well, it's pretty much as you'd expect a Cup car version of the NC to be. It actually does have better tyres than the standard NC. I believe the standard NC runs on sort of standard street tyres. These actually run on Sport Compound, which in terms of the game are sort of those semi-road legal slicks, which is what this car runs, hence why it's allowed around the track. It's not on full racing tyres. And yeah, it's actually very good, very, very grippy. It's, yeah, as you'd pretty much as you'd expect, really. Of course, removing smart rate from the NC as well does also help in terms of the handling potential of this car. And yeah, probably one of the best handling MX-5s that you can buy. That's pretty unsurprising. Of course, straight line speed wise, if you run it against anything that isn't another one of these, is not quite great. But if you do want more straight line speed, then you can always get this mad bastard. The 2010 Mazda MX-5 Super 20, 225 horsepower, 180 foot-pound torque, 2,586 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful car here today. So, on the 20th anniversary of the Mazda MX-5, Mazda decided to try something a little bit mental. Why don't they take a Mazda MX-5 NC, slap a supercharger to it, improve a bunch of little things, suspension, tyres, give it wider arches so it can have wider tyres, so on and so forth, and then sell 20 of them, and then you end up with this, possibly the most sought after Mazda MX-5 of the lot, and this thing is mental. This is legitimately a quick Mazda MX-5, 225 horsepower in a car that does not weigh an awful lot. What does that result with? Well, you get essentially all the good things of a Mazda MX-5, but with even more power. You know the Mazda Speed MX-5, what I said about that, how it was all of a Mazda MX-5, but with more power, which is nice. This is all of the NC MX-5, which was all of the standard MX-5, but now with a lot more power, and that makes this a lot of fun. Very fun car, very chuckable car, probably my favourite of the ones that I drove today, because it was indeed the quickest of all of them. Yeah, an excellent, excellent car. I do recommend giving the Super 20 a go. A little bit rare, but definitely worth finding. Next up, the newest generation of the Mazda MX-5, at least what we have in game, the 2016 Mazda MX-5, 155 horsepower, 148 foot-pound torque, 2,310 pounds of weight. Interestingly, we are actually losing some power from the NC MX-5, but of course you get the advantage of less overall curb weight. So between this and the NC, it sort of gets made up with. The ND is kind of a divisive version of the Mazda MX-5. When it first came out, people were not particularly happy with the fact the MX-5 now has a more angry face on it, but after a few years of repetition, most people sort of got used to it. I definitely got used to it. I quite like the ND MX-5. Maybe not my favourite in terms of its looks, but in terms of the interior and also mechanically, probably the best MX-5 there has been. There's also the new RF model recently, which is an excellent car, bringing back the good old Mazda MX-5 Coupe, which we've been missing for quite a few years. As far as this one goes to drive, essentially it is the NC but improved. The handling is improved over the standard NC. You do feel that slight lack of power, I guess, but again, it is much lighter of a car. It is actually, you know, well over 200 pounds lighter, almost 300 pounds lighter than the MX-5, so it does handle a little bit nicer. Yeah, overall, a really nice car, great platform to do tuning with, as you'd expect from the Mazda MX-5. The legend lives on, and the legend is still alive. But there's one more car to get to, the 2017 Abarth 124 Spider. 165 horsepower, 184 foot-pound torque, 2,477 pounds of weight. This is the torquiest car we have here today. So, what is this doing here? Well, Mazda entered an agreement with Fiat. Fiat gets a small little sports car and also pays Mazda a little bit, and the result of that was, well, this, which is a rebadged Mazda MX-5, sort of, apart from one key feature. You see, while the standard Mazda MX-5 has a 2-litre Skyactiv petrol engine, this has a 1.4-litre turbo engine out of an Abarth 595. Which is interesting. In fact, in this case, it is even a little bit more tuned up than you'd get from a standard 595. So, what that actually does is it changes the car's dynamics quite dramatically. You lose a lot of the displacement, so the high revvy stuff's gone. However, you do get a turbo, which means it has a lot more low-end push. Unfortunately, around the Top Gear track, that isn't quite so good. There's not a lot of slow-speed corner exit to really make up the time. It's much better to have the higher revving, always on power. You do have to sort of short shift with this a little bit. The front end is also a bit heavier, mainly down to the extra weight incurred from having that turbo block up front, but overall, it's still a good car to drive. Still probably my overall favourite because it's an Abarth, but overall driving favourite is easily the Super 20. But yeah, a fun car if you do want to give it a go. Unsurprisingly, the Super 20 was the quickest car today, going to 195th place with a 124.023, goes in between a Volvo S60 Polestar and a BMW M5. It's quicker than a Chrysler 300C, a HSV Commodore, a Skyline R32, a Lotus Carlton. That is a legitimately quick car, the Super 20. Moving down the board a bit, the Mazda Speed MX-5 goes into 292nd place with 128.611, just off of a Dodge Neon SRT4, which is another crazy turbo car. Quicker than a Dodge Coronet, Buick GSX, a modern-day Subaru BRZ, which is quite surprising. Yeah, the Mazda Speed MX-5 can still hold its own. Next up, the Mazda MX-5 Cup car goes into 305th place with 129.153 between a Bel Air Hoonigan and a Chrysler Valiant Charger, and the Mazda MX-5 ND goes into 310th place with 129.317. Just missing out, interestingly, on a modern Hyundai Veloster, but it is quicker than a Chevrolet Nova, an older Civic Type R, a Renault Alpine Le Mans. Pretty good times from both of those cars. Again, considering the power of these cars, they are actually doing quite well. Moving down once again, we find the Abarth 124 Spider in 351st place with 130.923, goes in between a Plymouth Fury and a Vauxhall Corsa VXR. Again, that overall added weight just not quite suiting this track as well as the power delivery of the Abarth, but still a very excellent car. Moving down a little bit more, in 360th place we find the Mazda MX-5 NC with a 131.346, goes in between a Subaru Legacy and a Ford F-150 Raptor. It's quicker than a Holden Torana, Eagle Talon, Volvo 850R, you know, standing toe-to-toe with some other sports car legends. Now we end up at the NAs. In 396th place, we find the Mazda MX-5 1.8 with a 134.880, goes in between a Holden Monaro GCS 327 and a Ford F-150 SVT Raptor. Interestingly quicker than a Jaguar XK 120 SE, which was the fastest car in the world at one point, so there's something. And finally, unsurprisingly, the slowest car today going into 407th place, the Mazda MX-5 or 1.6 with a 135.676 goes in between a Porsche 914-6 and an Alfa Romeo GT-V6, slightly quicker than a Mercedes-Benz 280 SL, Lamborghini LM002. Surprisingly, the time difference between the 1.8 and the 1.6 is actually a lot more significant than I was expecting, considering the 1.6 was actually the better driving of those two. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this nice little episode dedicated to the Mazda MX-5. Let me know which one was your favourite down below in the comments section. Join us next time when we are going to be doing a Rivals episode, as well as taking a look at some classic sports cars next time around in the full episode. So join us for that. Until then, farewell.
You know what I'm saying. The sorrow that my heart holds in, knowing just where my hopes and dreams are going. I won't let you be. Got up in a wall that you are not part of. Eyes on the slit of your father with love.